Something unprecedented is happening in America's federal courts, and it's not what anyone expected. Multiple Trump-appointed prosecutors across the country have been disqualified by federal judges for serving illegally. Their cases have been dismissed. Their authority has been revoked. And yet, they're still showing up to court, still signing indictments, still claiming to be U.S. attorneys. The Justice Department isn't backing down. They're ignoring court orders. They're attacking federal judges. And they're testing whether the executive branch needs to listen to the judiciary at all. This isn't a legal technicality. This is a constitutional crisis playing out in courtrooms across America. And it's escalating. Let me show you exactly what's happening. At least 5 Trump-appointed prosecutors have been disqualified recently after judges ruled they were serving unlawfully. These aren't minor procedural violations. Federal judges have found that the Trump administration violated the Constitution by keeping these prosecutors in power beyond their legal authority. The decision marks the latest instance in recent months that a judge has ruled that a Trump-appointed prosecutor is serving unlawfully. Here's how it works. The Attorney General can appoint an interim U.S. attorney for up to 120 days if the President does not nominate and the Senate does not confirm a permanent replacement. After that, the federal district courts can appoint a temporary prosecutor until a permanent nominee is confirmed. It's a clear legal limit, 120 days. After that, the courts decide who leads the prosecutor's office, not the President. This system exists for a reason, to prevent any administration from placing loyalists in powerful positions without Senate oversight. But the Trump administration found a workaround. Or at least, they tried to. When the 120-day limit expired, Attorney General Pam Bondi didn't let the courts appoint replacements. Instead, she gave these prosecutors new titles, changed their job descriptions, moved them into different roles that allowed them to keep doing exactly what they were doing before. Federal judges saw through it immediately. U.S. District Judge Lorna Schofield ruled that Trump loyalist John Sarcone has been unlawfully serving as interim U.S. attorney for the Northern District of New York and disqualified him from James' investigation and another case. Schofield wrote in her ruling that all subpoenas that Sarcone issued are quashed since the federal prosecutor overstayed his legal 120-day appointment. Sarcone has served in the role since last March. The judge's language was direct. When the executive branch of government skirts restraints put in place by Congress and then uses that power to subject political adversaries to criminal investigations, it acts without lawful authority. But Sarcone is just one example. This pattern is repeating across the country. Bilal Saili, a federal prosecutor appointed by the administration to serve as acting U.S. attorney for California's Central District without Senate approval, was named to the role unlawfully, a judge ruled in October 2025. Sijal Chadha, who was named interim U.S. attorney for the District of Nevada, was disqualified in September for serving past her 120-day limit after the Justice Department shifted her to a different role that allowed her to continue in the position. Trump's former personal lawyer, Alina Habba, stepped down as acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey in December after an appeals court disqualified her for serving unlawfully. And then there's Lindsey Halligan. Halligan's case reveals just how far this conflict has escalated. A judge in December ruled Trump ally Lindsey Halligan was unlawfully appointed to her role as U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia and dismissed her cases against James and former FBI Director James Comey. The judge's ruling was unambiguous. Halligan had no legal authority. Her appointment violated the Constitution. Every action she took in that role, every indictment, every subpoena, every court filing was void. So Halligan stopped using the title, right? No. A federal judge wants to know why Lindsey Halligan is still using the title of U.S. attorney despite a judge ruling in November that she is legally not in the position. U.S. District Judge David Novak of Richmond issued a 3-page order demanding to know why Halligan is still serving in the post. What makes this even more remarkable? Novak is a Trump appointee. This isn't a partisan attack. This is a judge Trump himself nominated, asking why the Justice Department is ignoring a federal court order. The judge's order is unusual because he issued it on his own, not at the request of defense attorneys. Novak gave Halligan 7 days to explain herself. He demanded to know why her identification does not constitute a false or misleading statement. He even suggested potential disciplinary action. The Justice Department's response was defiant. The court's thinly veiled threat to use attorney discipline to cudgel the executive branch into conforming its legal position in all criminal prosecutions to the views of a single district judge is a gross abuse of power and an affront to the separation of powers, the DOJ wrote in its filing. Read that again. The Justice Department just accused a federal judge of abusing power for enforcing a court order. The Justice Department, in a written response to an order from U.S. District Judge David Novak, accused Novak, a Trump appointee, of initiating an inquisition into Halligan's official signature in court filings. This is where we are. The executive branch is openly attacking the judiciary, not for making a ruling they disagree with, for expecting them to follow it. And the Department of Justice isn't just defending Halligan in court filings. Despite the court order, Habba, a former personal attorney to Trump, still claims the title on both her personal and official Dogex accounts. The DOJ's official website also lists Habba as acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Even after being disqualified, these prosecutors continue to identify themselves as U.S. attorneys. The Justice Department's official websites list them in these roles. They sign court documents with these titles. They prosecute cases under this authority. It's as if the court rulings never happened. Why does this matter? Because it's not about job titles or bureaucratic procedures. It's about whether courts have any power to check the executive branch. The wave of judicial rulings disqualifying Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys goes beyond questions of personnel. It strikes at the foundation of how federal prosecutors gain lawful authority. By finding that Bondi and the Department of Justice overstepped limits on temporary appointments, judges have raised constitutional concerns about executive power, the integrity of federal prosecutions, and the stability of the DOJ itself. Think about what's happening here. A federal judge rules that a prosecutor has no legal authority. The prosecutor's cases get dismissed. But the prosecutor keeps showing up, keeps filing new cases, keeps claiming the same title, and the Justice Department backs them up. What happens to the rule of law when court orders become optional? Legal experts are watching this closely. Joshua Naftalis, a Manhattan federal prosecutor for 11 years before entering private practice in 2023, said it's always a big deal when judges say that the U.S. attorney doesn't have the authority. But here's what makes this even more complicated. The Justice Department is appealing these rulings. They argue that the judges got it wrong, that their interpretation of the appointment law is incorrect, that Halligan and the others do have legal authority. Fine. Appeal the decision. That's how the system works. But here's the problem. Novak wrote in his order that although the government had appealed the ruling that nullified Halligan's appointment, the appeals court had not issued a stay in the case, meaning the original decision remained binding precedent in this district, while the appeals process played out. No stay was issued. That means the ruling stands until the appeals court says otherwise. The Justice Department doesn't get to ignore it just because they disagree. But that's exactly what they're doing. For the last month and a half, Lindsey Halligan has simply continued to serve as the U.S. District Attorney as if Curry hadn't ruled that her appointment was invalid. This creates an impossible situation for everyone involved. Defense attorneys don't know if the prosecutor bringing charges against their clients has legal authority. Judges don't know if the indictments signed by these prosecutors are valid. Witnesses don't know if the subpoenas they receive can be enforced. The entire system depends on clarity about who has legal authority to do what. And right now, that clarity is gone. Meanwhile, new cases keep coming. In the meantime, Robert McBride, a career prosecutor serving as Halligan's number 2 in the U.S. Attorney's Office for only a handful of weeks, was fired. McBride's firing reveals another layer to this story. Career prosecutors, people who have worked in these offices for years, through multiple administrations, are being pushed out. They're being replaced with political loyalists who will do what the administration wants, regardless of what courts say. And the cases these loyalist prosecutors are bringing, they're not random. They're targeting Trump's perceived enemies. The ruling came 2 months after Halligan secured indictments against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, only to have them thrown out due to her unlawful appointment. James Comey, Letitia James, both prominent Trump critics, both indicted by prosecutors whose appointments were later ruled unconstitutional. In the meantime, the Department of Justice has brought in new prosecutors to try to secure grand jury indictments against Comey and James, but has so far failed to convince 2 grand juries to sign off on charges against James. Even after Halligan's cases were dismissed, the Justice Department isn't giving up. They're trying again. Different prosecutors. Same targets. This is what federal judges are pushing back against. Not just the appointment process, but what it represents. The use of federal prosecutorial power to go after political opponents. It appeared to mark a rare reality check for the administration, which has taken extensive steps to keep its embattled U.S. attorneys in their posts, even as courts have ruled they are serving unlawfully. Some prosecutors have resigned. Julianne Murray, Delaware's GOP chair-turned-top federal prosecutor, announced her resignation Friday, just days after Alina Habba said she was leaving her position atop New Jersey's federal prosecuting office. But others are digging in, and the Justice Department is supporting them. So where does this end? One possibility: the appeals courts uphold the lower court rulings. The disqualifications stand. The Justice Department is forced to appoint new prosecutors through proper channels. The system survives. Another possibility: the appeals courts side with the Justice Department. The appointments are validated retroactively. All the cases proceed. The executive branch wins. Or, and this is the scenario that keeps constitutional scholars up at night, neither side backs down. The Justice Department keeps ignoring court orders. More judges keep issuing more rulings. More prosecutors get disqualified. More cases get dismissed. And the entire federal prosecutorial system descends into chaos. Because here's what nobody's saying out loud. If the executive branch can ignore judicial orders about prosecutor appointments, what else can they ignore? What other court rulings become optional? This isn't theoretical. It's happening right now, in multiple federal districts, with more cases every week. The Nevada District Court has 7 judges, for example, and all 7 were appointed by either President Obama or President Biden. It's the same situation with the Northern District of New York, where all 5 judges on that court were appointed by Obama or Biden. Some supporters of the Trump administration see this as partisan warfare. Democratic-appointed judges blocking Republican prosecutors. But that explanation falls apart when you look at the specifics. Judge Novak, the one demanding Halligan explain herself, Trump appointed him. These aren't just Democratic judges. These are judges across the political spectrum saying the same thing. You violated the law. And the law in question isn't ambiguous. It's a statute. It has clear time limits. It specifies what happens when those limits expire. The Justice Department knew about these limits. They chose to circumvent them anyway. The question now is whether courts have any power to enforce their own rulings when the executive branch simply refuses to comply. This is how constitutional crises begin. Not with dramatic confrontations, but with quiet defiance. With court orders that get ignored, with legal boundaries that get tested, then pushed, then broken. The executive branch argues they're defending presidential authority. The courts argue they're defending the rule of law, and neither side is willing to blink. What happens when loyalty becomes more important than legality? What happens when political appointees keep their positions not because courts approve them, but because the administration refuses to let them go? The answers to these questions will determine not just the fate of a few prosecutors, but the future of America's constitutional system itself. Because if federal courts can't enforce their own rulings about who has legal authority to prosecute crimes, what can they enforce?